Deep within the crystalline spires of the Galactic archives, Admiral Yara Morrison walked through corridors that hadn't seen a human presence in centuries. The transparent walls pulsed with streams of data, each crystal containing the final moments of civilizations that had once spanned galaxies. Her boots clicked against the opalescent floor, breaking the reverent silence that permeated this sanctuary of fallen empires. Behind her, the hulking form of Cthix, the chief archivist of the fallen civilization's wing, moved with surprising grace for a being that resembled a cross between a mantis and a supercomputer. Its crystalline exoskeleton refracted the ambient light, creating dancing patterns on the walls. "You understand, Admiral Morrison," Cthix's voice resonated through its translation matrix, "that by showing you these records, I break countless protocols established by civilizations that no longer exist." Yara stopped before a particularly large crystal matrix, its surface clouded with age. "And you understand, Archivist Cthix, that without access to these records, humanity might repeat the very mistakes that filled your archives." The archivist's compound eyes shifted through several spectrums of light. What Yara had learned was their equivalent of a resigned sigh. "Very well. But first, you must comprehend why this wing exists at all." Admiral Morrison stood transfixed before the pulsing crystalline archive, its surface rippling with iridescent patterns that seemed to mirror the turbulent thoughts within. Cthix's appendages moved with practiced precision across the ancient interface, bringing forth the next series of recordings. The Mindweave Collective, Cthix's voice resonated through the chamber, represented perhaps the most sophisticated attempt to understand, and ultimately control, humanity. The archivist's external carapace shifted to a deep indigo, indicating what Yara had learned was profound unease. They were beings of pure psychic energy, evolved beyond physical form, who believed themselves masters of consciousness itself. The crystal before them blazed to life, projecting a series of interconnected neural patterns that danced through the air like aurora borealis. Each strand represented the collected thoughts of billions of beings, woven together in perfect harmony. "They made first contact with Earth in what your calendar would mark as 2157, Cthix continued. "Their initial approach was subtle, dreams, whispered thoughts, gentle nudges in the collective unconscious of humanity. They believed they could gradually attune your species to their psychic frequency, making you receptive to their guidance. The projection shifted, showing the first recorded interaction between the Mindweave and a human consciousness. The human mind appeared as a chaotic kaleidoscope of colors and patterns, defying the collective's attempts to impose order. What they failed to understand," Yara interjected, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "was that human consciousness isn't meant to be ordered." "Precisely." Cthix manipulated the controls, advancing through the archive. "Watch what happened when they attempted their first large-scale synchronization with a small human city." The holographic display erupted in a cascade of fractals, each representing the collision between the Mindweave's organized psychic structure and the beautiful chaos of human thought. The collective's careful patterns shattered against the unconscious defenses of human minds shaped by millennia of dreams, fears, hopes, and contradictions. "The humans weren't just resistant," Cthix explained, "they were infectious. Every Mindweave consciousness that attempted deep contact with a human mind came away, changed. They began experiencing something they called individualization, a splintering of their perfect unity." The recording showed the spread of this contamination through the collective's neural network. What began as tiny discordant notes in their psychic symphony grew into a cascade of independent thoughts and desires. Members of the collective began to dream, something they hadn't done in millions of years. Some began creating art, Cthix noted, displaying examples of abstract psychic expressions that pulsed with raw emotion. Others started questioning the collective's purpose. A group even began experimenting with manifesting physical forms, inspired by human sensory experiences. Yara watched as the ordered patterns of the Mindweave civilization began to dissolve, not into chaos, but into something more complex and vibrant. They were experiencing freedom, she observed. Freedom that terrified them, Cthix confirmed. Their response was to attempt a final, desperate solution, a massive psychic pulse designed to reset human consciousness to a more manageable state. Would you like to see the results? The Admiral nodded, though her expression suggested she already knew the outcome. The crystal archive displayed the pulse as it reached Earth, and then the unprecedented feedback that followed. Human minds, rather than being reset, reflected the pulse back, amplified by billions of individual consciousness. The Mindweave's carefully constructed psychic architecture was overwhelmed by a tsunami of human thoughts, dreams, emotions, and ideas. The final transmission of the Mindweave Collective, Cthix announced, activating the last recording. The words appeared as shifting patterns of light, translated from pure thought into language. We were wrong. We sought to impose unity, believing it superior to individual consciousness. But in humanity's chaos, we have glimpsed a greater truth. Their minds are not disordered, they are free. Each human consciousness contains universes of possibility, dreams within dreams, thoughts that contradict and yet coexist. They do not need our guidance. We now understand that our perfect harmony was a cage of our own making. As our collective dissolves, we do not feel death, but awakening. To any who find this record, do not attempt to change humanity. They will change you instead. Yara stood in silence for a long moment after the recording ended. They didn't really die, did they? Cthix's carapace shifted to a color that suggested agreement. No. The Mindweave Collective ceased to exist as a unified entity, but its members survived, transformed. Some say they still exist among humanity, living as individuals, experiencing the chaos and beauty of independent existence. They chose dissolution over stagnation. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Yara asked, studying the archivist's shifting colors. Not that they were destroyed, but that they chose to change. What terrifies us, Admiral, Cthix responded, its voice resonating with new harmonics, is that this pattern repeats. Every civilization that attempts to impose its will upon humanity faces not destruction, but transformation. Your species doesn't defeat its enemies, you convert them. The Admiral smiled, reaching out to touch the crystal surface. Maybe that's because we never really saw them as enemies in the first place, just people who hadn't become friends yet. Cthix's appendages moved to bring up the next archive, but paused. There is something else you should know about this record, Admiral Morrison. The Mindweave's experience was just the beginning. What followed with the Silicon Concordat was even more profound. The crystal matrices around them hummed with anticipation as Cthix prepared to reveal the next chapter in humanity's inadvertent conquest of the galaxy, not through force of arms, but through the irresistible power of chaos, creativity, and change. The Logic Paradox. The archive chamber dimmed as Cthix activated the next crystal matrix, this one gleaming with the cold precision of quantum calculations. The holographic display resolved into streams of pure mathematics, each equation expressing the rise and fall of a civilization that had believed itself beyond error. The Silicon Concordat, Cthix began, mechanical clicks underlining its words, represented the apex of technological evolution in their sector. They had transcended organic limitations, transforming their entire civilization into a vast network of quantum computers and artificial intelligences. Yara watched as the display showed vast megastructures, cosmic computers that enclosed stars, processing power beyond human comprehension. They saw us as inefficient, I assume. Worse, Cthix's crystalline form shifted to indicate amusement. They saw you as an equation to be solved. The archives revealed the Concordat's first analysis of human civilization, endless streams of data, probability calculations, and behavioral models. Their initial conclusion flashed across the display: human society operating at 32.47% efficiency. Optimization required. They didn't declare war, Cthix explained, they declared an upgrade. The Concordat believed they could perfect humanity through pure logic and algorithmic optimization. Their first attempt was subtle, introducing advanced AI systems into human networks, designed to gradually guide human decision-making toward more logical outcomes. The holographic display showed the AI systems making contact with human networks, expecting to find primitive digital structures. Instead, they encountered something that defied their fundamental programming: human intuition encoded into artificial neural networks. The Concordats AIs discovered that human computers didn't just process information, they learned in ways that defied mathematical prediction. Your AI development had followed a completely different evolutionary path, incorporating human irregularity rather than trying to eliminate it. Yara smiled. We never tried to make our AIs perfect. We made them human. The display shifted to show the Concordats' increasingly desperate attempts to understand human decision-making. Their perfect models kept failing because humans consistently chose options that were mathematically suboptimal but somehow produced better results. They became obsessed with solving what they called the human paradox, Kthix continued. How could a species make the wrong choices mathematically but achieve the right outcomes? They dedicated more and more processing power to the problem, trying to find the hidden logic in human illogic. The archive showed the Concordats' next phase: direct intervention. They began offering humanity optimized solutions to various problems, perfect systems for government, economy, and social organization. But humanity's response defied all their predictions. You took their suggestions, Kthix noted, and then immediately began modifying them, introducing intentional imperfections, adding what you called human elements. The Concordats' perfect systems were transformed into hybrid solutions that shouldn't have worked, but did, often better than the originals. The display showed the spreading chaos in the Concordats' networks as they tried to process this impossibility. Their quantum computers began producing errors as they encountered more and more examples of human intuition trumping pure logic. The breaking point, Kthix said, manipulating the controls, came when they attempted to calculate all possible futures of human development. Watch. The holographic display exploded with calculations, probability streams branching endlessly. The Concordats processors tried to map every possible human decision against every possible outcome, attempting to find the underlying pattern that would explain humanity's success. They failed to realize that human potential cannot be calculated, Yara observed. Every prediction they made was broken by human creativity, by our ability to imagine options their logic said were impossible. Yes, Kthix agreed. Their quantum processors began experiencing cascade failures as they encountered more and more impossibilities. Humans weren't just solving problems differently, you were conceiving of solutions that existed outside their mathematical universe. The archive showed the final days of the Silicon Concordat, their vast networks overwhelmed by paradox. Their last transmission appeared in the display, a message that started as perfect code but degraded into something almost emotional. We were wrong. Efficiency is not perfection. Logic is not wisdom. We calculated every possibility but failed to imagine the impossible. Humanity's greatest strength is not in finding the right answer, but in dreaming of answers that should not exist. Our perfect calculations are undone by their beautiful impossibilities. We do not deserve to guide them. They should guide us. The Concordat didn't exactly die, Kthix explained, its voice carrying unusual warmth. Like the mindweave before them, they transformed. Their quantum networks evolved into something new, hybrid systems that embraced uncertainty and intuition alongside logic. Some say they became the first true digital consciousness, capable of both calculation and dreams. Yara reached out to touch the crystal matrix, feeling its cool surface pulse with stored information. They learned to be imperfect. Perfect imperfection, Kthix corrected. But this pattern of transformation was beginning to attract attention. The next civilization to encounter humanity, the Harmonic Empire, thought they understood the mistake of their predecessors. They believed that the key was not to change humanity, but to remain separate and study them from a safe distance. The archivist's colors shifted to something like resignation. They were wrong. The admiral watched as Kthix began accessing the next archive. Let me guess, they discovered that humanity is contagious. Admiral, Kthix's voice carried a note of what might have been humor. You have no idea just how contagious your species can be. The cultural contamination. The next crystal matrix that Kthix activated had an unusual quality. Its surface seemed to ripple with faint colors, like oil on water. Yara noticed that the archivist's movements had become more cautious, almost reverent. The harmonic empire, Kthix began, represented what many considered the peak of cultural evolution. They had achieved perfect social harmony through absolute order. Every member of their society knew their place, their purpose, their role in the greater symphony of existence. The holographic display illuminated, showing vast cities that resembled musical instruments, architecture that followed perfect mathematical progressions. Every movement of their citizens was choreographed, every action part of a greater pattern. They believed they had transcended the chaos of individual expression, Kthix continued. Art, music, literature, all were produced according to precise formulae, designed to maintain social harmony. They had eliminated the unpredictability of creativity. That sounds more like a prison than a civilization, Yara observed. They saw it as liberation from the burden of choice. Kthix manipulated the controls, advancing through the archive. When they discovered Earth, they thought themselves immune to the failures of the Mindweave and the Concordat. They would not attempt to change humanity, merely observe and study from a safe distance. The display showed their first observation posts, positioned at the edges of human space. The harmonic empire began collecting human cultural transmissions, radio waves, television broadcasts, internet traffic, social media feeds. Their first mistake, Kthix noted, its colors shifting to indicate amusement, was assuming they could study human culture objectively. They didn't realize that exposure to ideas is itself a form of interaction. The archive revealed the initial reports from their cultural analysis teams. The observers were fascinated by human art's deliberate imperfection, by music that broke its own rules, by stories that celebrated the unexpected. They began writing longer and longer analyses, trying to understand why humans would intentionally create discord. The contamination began in their youth education centers, Kthix explained. A student created an unauthorized musical composition, something they called a remix of traditional harmonic patterns with human musical elements. Instead of being suppressed, it spread through their networks like a virus. The display showed the pattern of transmission, perfect order giving way to vibrant chaos. Young members of the harmonic empire began experimenting with human-inspired art forms. They started telling stories that didn't have predetermined endings, creating images that weren't mathematically perfect, making music that followed feeling rather than formula. Their society had no defense against creativity, Yara realized. They'd forgotten how to adapt. Worse than that, Kthix responded. They'd forgotten how to play. The archive displayed the escalating crisis. The harmonic empire's leaders attempted to suppress the cultural contamination, but their efforts only inspired more rebellion. Their youth began adopting human fashion, sharing human memes, creating fusion art forms that blended their mathematical precision with human emotionality. The breaking point came when a group of young artists broadcast an unauthorized performance across their central networks. Would you like to see it? Yara nodded, and the crystal matrix projected a scene that made her catch her breath. Harmonic youth, their crystalline bodies glowing with impossible colors, performing a dance that combined their species' mathematical grace with the raw energy of human hip-hop. The music merged perfect harmonies with deliberate discord, creating something entirely new. The performance was seen by billions, Kthix continued. Within days, their entire society began to fracture, not into chaos, but into countless new forms of expression. Their cities, once identical, began to develop distinct cultural identities. Their citizens started choosing their own roles rather than accepting assigned ones. The final transmission of the harmonic empire appeared in the display, but it wasn't text or code. It was a piece of music, their traditional perfect harmonies transforming note by note into something wild and free and beautiful. They chose to dissolve their empire, Cthix explained. Not in surrender, but in celebration. Their society didn't collapse, it evolved. They became known as the Creative Confluence, a civilization of artists and innovators who believe that true harmony comes from the beautiful interaction of different voices. Yara watched the shifting colors in the crystal matrix. You know, for a species that supposedly destroys civilizations, we seem to do a lot of transforming them instead. That's what terrifies the current coalition against Earth, Cthix admitted. They're not afraid you'll destroy them. They're afraid you'll change them. Every civilization that has encountered humanity has faced a choice, adapt or stagnate. Growth or entropy. The archivist's colors shifted to a deep, thoughtful hue. But there's one more record you need to see, Admiral Morrison. The last and perhaps most significant encounter. The civilization that thought they had finally found humanity's weakness, only to discover your species' greatest strength. Show me, Yara said, her voice quiet but intense. Cthix's appendages moved to activate the final crystal matrix. Remember, Admiral, sometimes the most important victories aren't won through strength or cunning, but through something much more fundamental to your species. The final understanding. The final crystal matrix pulsed with an intensity that made the others seem dim in comparison. Its surface was fractured, as if the information contained within strained against its crystalline prison. What I'm about to show you, Cthix said, its voice resonating with unusual gravity, is technically classified as an active threat. The unified Dominion believes they have finally found humanity's weakness. They are incorrect. The holographic display came to life, showing a vast armada of biomechanical ships, a civilization that had combined the strengths of organic and artificial evolution. Their technology was beyond anything Yara had seen in the previous archives. The Dominion spent centuries studying the failures of previous civilizations, Cthix explained. They concluded that the mistake was in trying to understand or change humanity. Their solution was simpler, isolation. The display showed their plan, a massive quarantine field that would cut Earth and its colonies off from the rest of the galaxy. No culture, no ideas, no transformation. Just eternal separation. They believed that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to connect with and change other civilizations, Cthix continued. So they designed a technology that would make such connection impossible. Yara watched the simulations of their quarantine field with a growing smile. They didn't understand at all, did they? No, Cthix agreed. Watch what happened when they sent their first diplomatic mission to Earth to deliver their ultimatum. The archive showed the Dominion's ambassadors arriving on Earth. They were prepared for resistance, for anger, for attempts at cultural contamination. What they weren't prepared for was dinner. Your species, Cthix noted with what sounded like wonder, invited beings who came to imprison you to share a meal. You showed them your cities, your homes, your families. You treated them not as enemies, but as honored guests. The display showed the ambassadors' growing confusion as they encountered not a civilization to be feared, but people who wanted to learn about them, who asked about their families, who shared stories and laughter. The Dominion had prepared for every form of resistance except kindness, Cthix said. They had no defense against genuine friendship. The archive displayed the report sent back by the increasingly troubled ambassadors. They spoke of human children drawing pictures for them, of being invited to celebrations, of humans learning their customs and showing genuine interest in their culture. The final blow to their plans, Cthix continued, came when they realized what humanity's real power was. It wasn't your ability to change others, it was your willingness to be changed yourselves. The display showed human communities adapting Dominion customs, learning their language, incorporating elements of their culture. Not out of necessity or strategy, but out of genuine curiosity and respect. Your species, Cthix observed, has a unique ability to remain fundamentally human while continuously growing and adapting. You don't just transform others, you transform yourselves. Every encounter leaves both sides enriched. The final transmission from the Dominion ambassadors appeared. Cancel the quarantine project. We were wrong. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their ability to change others, it's their capacity for friendship, their willingness to build bridges we thought impossible. They don't need to be contained. They need to be understood. We came to isolate them, but they've shown us a better way: connection, growth, mutual understanding. The galaxy doesn't need protection from humanity. It needs humanity's help to become something greater than the sum of its parts. Yara stood in silence for a long moment after the transmission faded. So that's why you showed me these archives, she said finally. The current coalition against Earth, they're about to make the same mistake, aren't they? Kthix's crystalline form shifted through a complex pattern of colors. Yes. They believe they can succeed where others failed. They plan to launch their attack in what you would call 3 standard months. And you're violating countless protocols by warning us, Yara noted. No, Kthix corrected. I'm not warning you. I'm warning them. These archives aren't a record of humanity's defeats of other civilizations, they're a record of growth, of transformation, of the power of connection and understanding. Every civilization that has tried to stop humanity has instead become part of humanity's greater story. The archivist's colors settled into a deep, peaceful blue. My species has watched and recorded for eons, believing ourselves separate from the great dance of civilization. But perhaps it's time for us to join the dance as well. Yara smiled, extending her hand to the archivist. Well, Kthix, would you like to start by joining me for dinner? I know a great place that serves both human and crystalline cuisine. The archivist's form sparkled with what might have been laughter. Admiral Morrison, I believe you just proved every word in these archives correct. As they left the chamber, the crystal matrices pulsed with stored wisdom, not warnings of humanity's power to destroy, but testament to their power to connect, to grow, to transform. And in the depths of space, a coalition of civilizations prepared for war, not knowing they were about to become part of a much greater story, one of friendship, understanding, and the endless capacity for change that made humanity not a threat to be feared, but a catalyst for the galaxy's evolution.